Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really fascinating and definitely controversial. Popular diets, health info, and specifically, the whole keto diet thing and heart health.
Exactly. And our goal today really is to break down a specific study that came out recently, and more importantly, the huge academic debate it kicked off.
Right.
Because, in this world flooded with health claims, especially if you don't have that deep biomedical background, knowing how to think critically about this stuff is just essential. We'll be using Professor Lin's analysis as a guide here.
Okay, so let's get into it. There's this term LMHR, lean mass hyperresponders. These are people on keto, high-fat diets, right? And they see these big jumps in cholesterol markers like LDL-C and ApoB.
That's right. Key markers for heart disease risk, normally.
Yeah, normally big red flags. This term, it came from Dave Feldman back in 2017, a software engineer, actually not a doctor. And then Nick Norwitz, a Harvard medical student, helped popularize it. So what was the big claim about these LMHR folks?
Well, the really bold claim was that for these individuals, these super high cholesterol numbers, they weren't actually a concern. But somehow for them, it was different. Benign, even.
Okay, that sounds controversial already.
It was. And this idea led to a study, the Keto CTA trial. It just got published March 18th, 2025. And its conclusion was basically that for LMHR people on keto, their high APO, high LDL-C, well, it wasn't linked to changes in their artery plaque.
So no connection to plaque buildup.
That's what they claimed. They said pre-existing plaque was the main thing predicting new plaque, not the cholesterol levels in these people.
Okay, but I sense a but coming. This is where the academic firestorm you mentioned really ignited.
Absolutely. Professor Lin wasn't alone. Almost immediately, this Keto CTA study got hit with a wave of criticism.
From who?
From, well, a lot of experts. Nutrition PhDs like Richard Curran, Nicola Guest, Dustin Moore, Kevin Klatt, Alan Flanagan. Cardiologists too, Joshua Lieberman, John Mandrola, a real coalition.
Wow. So what were they saying? What were the main criticisms?
It kind of boils down to a few key things. First, accusations of selective reporting, like cherry-picking data.
You mean twisting the results?
That's what critics argue, yeah. That the authors had an agenda and made the data fit. Richard Curran, for example, put out a preprint review.
That's like the early look at the research.
Exactly. And he said the study actually showed evidence of accelerated atherosclerosis, faster plaque buildup in these LMHR individuals.
Wait, so the study's own data suggested the opposite of its conclusion?
That's what Curran argued. And Nicola Guest pointed out the data seemed to show faster growth of unstable plaques, which are particularly dangerous.
Yikes. That's quite a contradiction.
It is. Dustin Moore called it a textbook case for unethical reporting, basically saying it was used to push a specific doctrine. And Spencer Naldowski, who was part of the original LMHR study group but left, even called Feldman and Norwitz dishonest researchers.
Strong words. Were there other issues, methodological problems?
Yes, definitely. Kevin Klatt raised questions about why the authors seemed to ditch their original analysis plan. They apparently switched to these exploratory analyses, which they couldn't fully explore, but then presented those as the main findings. It seemed odd.
And didn't you say the journal itself got criticized?
It did. JCC, the journal that published it. Several critics, including Klatt and Mandrola, called it an editorial failure. Like, how did this get through review presenting findings this way? John Mandrola was very clear.
The cardiologist.
Yes. He stressed this one study is nowhere near close to overturning, decades of solid scientific evidence showing LDL cholesterol does cause atherosclerosis.
This whole situation really highlights why critical thinking is so vital, doesn't it? Especially with health news that sounds maybe too good to be true or contradicts everything else we know.
Precisely. You have to look beyond the headline claim. And that brings us back to the consensus view, the one Professor Lin shares with many others. High LDL-C, high ApoB, even if you're lean, seem healthy, and you're on keto. It's still linked to faster plaque progression, increased cardiovascular risk. It's not somehow magically different for these individuals.
So for you listening, what's the takeaway here?
Well, it raises a really important question for all of us when we see health information.
Professor Lin had a really thought-provoking analogy for this, didn't he?
He did. He asked, if a heavy smoker lives to 100 and a non-smoker dies at 50 from lung cancer, would you then believe smoking prevents lung cancer and extends life?
Right. It's about not letting anecdotes or potentially flawed studies outweigh the larger body of evidence.
Exactly. Apply that same critical lens to all the health information you come across. Question the claims, look at the bigger picture, especially when something seems to defy established science. It's often more complex than it first appears.